John was working in his science lab, got blasted by gamma rays. Now he's Smash Trivia John, always smashing. He's friends with Ruffalo, crushing on Maslany, and also Sydney Sweeney. John's here saying, hello my gamma friends, welcome to the show, the Gamma Analysis Podcast.
Smash.
Hello, my Gamma friends. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Smash Trivia John. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram by searching Smash Trivia. I'll be the one with the big old green head in the profile picture. This is the Gamma Analysis. Basically, I'm going to review everything Hulk, all the movies, TV shows, and I also do random other geeky films. Hope you enjoy. Smash Trivia presents the Gamma Analysis. I want to ask everyone listening, if you could please do something for me. Please share the hell out of this podcast to all your friends. If you don't, Hawk will be angry. Now let's smash right into this episode. Today's episode is a review of Mallrats with my friend and Austin, aka Ty and Geek, from the Omniplex podcast. How you doing, Austin?
I'm good.
I'm glad. So the Mallrats is a film I've been wanting to review for a while because I love Kevin Smith in his movies. I love Mallrats, though I will say when I went to go back and rewatch it for this podcast, this is the first time I've watched it as an adult, and there are definitely some aspects to this that I'm like that I do not love.
Same here.
Two particular things. One, I really hate how much they use the R slur in this film.
Mm-hmm. It was 1995.
Yeah, and also, I hate how this film pushes this really annoying idea that Hollywood likes to push of all men want to be with people who are underage.
Yeah, that's one of those things. I have a little bit of a different opinion on it in that I think it works for this specific case, but boy, does the movie lean into it a little hard.
Yeah,
and I think it's really telling that Smith actually I noticed, now that I think about it, this is the last time he ever deals with it in his films. Like, he runs pretty far from that idea, actually.
It's time where I'm like, if they hadn't had the moment where one of our main characters wants to have sex with a 15-year-old girl, I wouldn't mind it so much because it's because then it would just be people who are supposed to be bad in the film that they're that want that, but the fact that they had one of our main characters, one of the people we're supposed to be rooting for, also want that. It's just like very icky.
It's so much anti-Smith that I almost wonder if it was something that was pushed on him, honestly, because it doesn't feel like Kevin Smith, and that's the interesting thing about this movie. Because I'm so well versed in the history of how this movie got made, I'm aware that there was so much meddling going on, and that feels like something the studio was like, oh, come on, that'd be edgy, that'd be funny, and I don't know. It's not very Kevin Smith. It is not at all Kevin Smith.
That makes sense. I'm not surprised there was a lot of studio meddling in this, seeing as this is his second ever film, which honestly kind of surprises me that he was able to get as someone as big as like Stan Lee to appear in his second ever film. Like, that's crazy to me.
I honestly think it had to come down to the script was that good, because his moment in the film is phenomenal. I'm fascinated by this movie too. Also, Clerks, you have to remember, Clerks exploded out of Sundance. It was a hot property. It was a hot hit. It was a big deal. I'm going to tell you, I looked up the box office on this movie, and I am staggered by what I found out, by just how much of a flop this movie was.
Yeah, I remember hearing that it was a very big flop, but it's just
It didn't.
Crazy.
It grossed $2.1 million. Let me list some movies from 1995 that grossed higher: Gordy, Born to Be Wild, Priest, Exotica, which is actually very good, but art house movies. Um, the Jerky Boys movie, which tanked, did 3 times what this did. National Lampoon Senior Trip did 2 times what this did. I'm amazed by it.
Wow. Only one of those films have I ever even heard of,
Mhm.
which is National Lampoon's Senior in Your Trip. Um, the,
Yeah.
I think this film, we know about it so much now, partially because Kevin Smith has become a big person in Hollywood, but also it's just gained cult classic status as
Yeah.
which a lot of his films get cult classic status. But one thing that I didn't realize till this time of watching that I very surprising is um so at the very end of the film they tease Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back
Hmm.
which the reason that surprises me is because it's 6 years after this film came
Hmm.
out that he was finally able to make that, and
Ooh,
and I'm pretty sure at least one, if not two, movies that he had to make before the origin of Silent Bob Strike Back.
I can explain this though because you're overlooking something. There was a comic that Kevin Smith did to bridge the two works, to bridge Chasing Amy and Dogma, Chasing Dogma, the Jay and Silent Bob miniseries, which Smith wrote, where he liberally took from that for Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. The Suzanne plot is in that, and so
Uh,
he got to do it. He did it earlier, but that said, most people have not read that comic, and also that comic is frankly awful. It's it's probably one of the worst things he's ever done.
which is surprising to me because I've never actually read any of Kevin Smith's comics, but from what I've heard, or at least like his comics that he's made for DC are like really well made
His
comics.
comics for DC and Marvel are brilliant. I'll tell you what. Can you give me 2 minutes so I can get my daughter and put her in the swing and let her rest?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. But yeah, getting back to the comics, Smith is actually a phenomenal comic book writer when it comes time to serious comics.
So so is he not great at writing comedic comics then? And that's
I know
interesting.
it's the grand irony. He's not very good at writing his own characters in comedy,
Huh.
in comic book form. He just didn't work out. It's crazy, but like I said, yes, you are right. There is that tease, and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is the one that everyone knows because it's a classic at this point. I have the screenplay to it sitting on my bookshelf. So,
Oh. I love the View Askew verse. It's I think it's so surprising he was able to like create this whole universe, and it's not like one franchise. It's like it's these are all very distinctly different films. They're
oh
not
yeah,
and if you don't know that they're connected, then they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you because they don't even name them to be anything similar.
no. Well, I mean, it's kind of funny. Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is the grand culmination, and it is probably the one that I've heard the most people say, "Oh yeah, I started there,"
Mm,
because they just thought it. They just thought it was they. Now inevitably, no one ever says that they stopped there, but they
mhm.
started there. Now, for me, it was Clerks Animated, and then my brother and I watched Clerks and Mallrats, and then that was in 2001, and then we watched Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back in the theater.
Nice.
Yeah, so I did get to see that one in the theater. What's kind of funny is when I was sitting in the theater for that movie, there was a trailer for a movie that I looked thought looked unbelievably stupid, and I actually got mad that I saw the trailer for it, called Super Troopers. I thought that trailer looked so bad. I thought there is no way in
Wow.
hell I am ever going to watch this movie. You know what the punchline to that is going to turn out to be. I
Uh,
have seen that movie so many times. I love that movie. It's one of my
uh,
comfort movies.
it would be so cool to see the Broken Lizard comedy troupe and Kevin Smith team up on something. I
You know,
think that would be so interesting.
it's shocking it hasn't happened. Clearly, it's the
Oh
same
man,
style of humor, and
yeah.
they clearly, like I said, I will say this, they cut an absolutely atrocious trailer for Super Troopers. I don't even think Brian Cox is in the trailer, just to show you how bad the trailer was. But I don't know. But like I said, yeah, Mallrats. I remember when we went back to that one, that when we were doing the movies, that Mallrats was the one that really, for me and my brother, was like, oh, this is the one that clicks. And I, I can think of a million reasons why. Honestly, that's why I wanted to do this
I
cast,
think
was to
it's
gush about it.
oh yeah, I love this film and I think it's one of the it's surprising that a big studio allowed him to make a film that was very much like kind of a love letter to superhero fans
Uh,
and at least for part of it are of it because like I think back in the 90s there wasn't it wasn't nearly as like a normalized thing for us for people to be a superhero fans and
it
they were like they act as if it was a bad thing for you to be a superhero fan.
it was a moment where Marvel could have easily gone under. It
Mm-hmm.
is. I actually just read the Marvel versus DC omnibus that just came out, and the entire reason that book exists is because Marvel and DC were like, we've got to do something to get people in the stores, so they did a bunch of crossovers. Phenomenal book, by the way. I do highly recommend it. But it speaks to that, that idea, and that's the thing that I think is so interesting about the movie is it is very much a movie about people who are kind of on the in crowd, kind of not. Like I feel like you have two couples in the movie that I have very distinctly different opinions about. You have whichever one of the I confuse the London brothers, and I feel bad that even doing this podcast, I think it's Jeremy that's the one that's in this one. And Claire Forlani, and they are the normal couple. They are the normies. And then you have Jason Lee and Shannon Doherty, and they are the weirdos. They're the outsiders. And I think that it's kind of interesting that's kind of how Smith plays that dynamic of here's one couple that's very conventionally attractive. Here's one couple that's also very conventionally attractive.
Yeah. I was like, when you said eventually trying for one, I was like, are you really about to say that either of those two women are not conventionally attractive?
No, well, God, Shannon Doherty qualifies for Playboy, but I'm just making the point that I will say that it is important to note that because I remember this about the 90s, Doherty was hated. Like she was viciously hated by the media for no reason. It was that people hated her character on 90210 and they confused her with the character.
Of course, people did.
In reality, of course, she was a very nice, very likable woman, and very close. Holly Marie Combs and Sarah Michelle Gellar both adored her. I remember. So she never really got the chance to shine as a comic actress except this one time. And I think that's criminal, honestly, that she
Yeah.
didn't get more chances because I think Doherty is
And
absolutely
and
phenomenal in the movie.
sadly, it probably she didn't get more chances because of the film flopping as hard as it did.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me because again, I think Doherty. I don't think Lee's performance honestly works if Doherty isn't matching him beat for beat.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this was Lee's first major performance, and he's great. He steals the film. But
Mm-hmm.
I think she has to match him beat for beat. She has to be as whip smart, as intelligent, as funny as he is. And I think she does. And you're right, because the film flopped. Again, when you're performing less than Gordy, for the love of God, which was, by the way, for people that
I,
don't know, the other Talking Pig movie in 1995.
Okay.
Yeah, people remember Babe a little bit better because it's kind of a
Yeah.
billion times better. It's fascinating to me. It is
Mhm.
fascinating to me. Like I said, I think Smith is very, but I also think that, I mean, I'm going to say right now, I think the script for this movie, because I'm someone who's a screenwriter as a hobby, I think the script of this movie is about as good. It's funny. I would say it's about as good a comedy script as any you had in the 90s, and it's not even the best comedy script of 1995. And that's bizarre to me. This was the year of Clueless. So Clueless casts this big shadow over this movie, including the fact that Breckin Meyer was considered for Jay. Can we take a moment and talk about that? By the way, that
Yeah.
fact
I
that
I don't know who Breckin Meyer is, but sure.
he was okay. Breckin Meyer played John in the first Garfield movie. He's that boring of a comic actor.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's him.
yeah.
Um,
He's Brittany Murphy's love interest in Clueless. I will say
okay.
that.
Hey, I've never seen Clueless, so I didn't know
It's one
that.
of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies. But here's the point that I wanted to make is you have for those that don't know, the studio tried to recast Jason Mewes. Seth Green and Breckin Meyer were who were considered. I just want to know how that ever was considered.
Uh,
Uh, because for those that don't
let's see.
know,
That would be
Jason,
that
for
would
those,
insane if they replaced one half of Jay and Silent Bob
I
with a
think it's
Hollywood actor.
I think it's even more insane than that because Jay isn't a character. It's just Jason Mewes being Jason
Hmm.
Mewes. Smith literally wrote the character as just, I want my friend to be in this movie because I think my friend is funny and I think other people will think he's funny.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could take someone who was literally that person down to the name, frankly, and recast them, it is insane to me. Um, but it occurs to me we started talking about this movie. Do you even really need to recap the plot? I mean, it's kind of pretty simple.
I don't usually recap plots of my episodes.
Uh,
I did when I started doing my
yeah,
podcast, but over time I just started being like, well,
I just
if I tell everybody everything that happens in the film, then what's the point of them watching?
yeah, yeah, and I think that and I think that that's a mistake to do. It is a simple plot. It's a day in the life movie. It's a day in the life shot in a mall. For the record, movies that are shot in real shopping malls are like, I don't know why, but it's like a drug for me. This movie and Chopping Mall are both set in real. Yeah, you're laughing at
Uh,
Chopping Mall. Have you seen
no,
it?
I've seen that. Yeah, yeah. I thought it was an interesting film. I did. That was a film that I did a reaction video to when I
Ooh,
used to
all right.
have I used to have a Patreon and I did a reaction video to
Oh,
that,
that's a good one too.
which was which it was fun to react to. It was it's very insane film. I think both of this and I love the fact that both this and Chopping Mall all go into this idea of how escalators
Yes.
are dangerous, and the reason I love that they do that is it validates it's that I've my whole life I've always had a crazy fear of escalators. It just causes me so much anxiety getting on them,
I feel you,
and
man.
it's not because of these films, because I had it way before having watched these films, but it's but I like that this validates my fear of them.
I love it, and you're right. I think they're inherently uncomfortable. They're inherently weird. They're inherently strange, and you're right. They both do that. I think that these movies are both. They're just both such good encapsulations of mall culture. I will point out, by the way, there is a novelization of Chopping Mall that just hit shelves. That is fantastic. I've got to be true to my name.
Interesting. I that's not the kind of film I would have expected to be turned into a book. Like
It's
because you
hysterical.
it's because that's a film that you're watching to see the kills in it, and and that's a lot. That's a very hard thing to translate to a book.
Well, I am going to say right now that the way that they handle the kills in the book is some of the hardest laughs I have had reading a book in
That's
a
awesome.
very long time. It's a phenomenal book. I
Mhm.
do recommend it.
Nice.
But getting back to this movie, it really is just kind of a hangout movie. It really is
Mhm.
just kind of a hangout movie. I will say that it is interesting because I think the movie has an interesting case of retroactive recognition that I really love about it. And it's not Ben Affleck, who is just so bold and so obvious. It's the actor that plays the dad in the movie. And I think it's one of those things
Mhm.
where I know that was supposed to be William Atherton, and he decided, yeah, this is too much. I've done this too much. So I want to know how the hell, like, I want to know the thought process that goes where we're not going to do William Atherton, who is the snob of snobs, but we're going to go to Michael goddamn Rooker. And if I'm,
Was
uh, my,
did he have much of a career in the 90s? He's Michael Rucker,
he
because
was,
like I
he's,
only know of him from Guardians of the Galaxy and even though I didn't really watch much of the show, I know he was in Walking Dead.
yeah,
Did he
he
have
was
much
a
of a
cult
career
actor.
back then?
He was a cult actor. He appeared in small roles or small films. His big one was Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, where he was this, you know, he was a serial killer. It's considered one of the scariest films ever made. Roger Ebert did a very intense, positive review of it, actually. It is based on a real guy, and that's what Rooker was known for. He was a scary guy that you cast. He was certainly not Yondu at this point. I'll put it
Mhm.
that way.
Yeah.
And he, for the longest time, this was all that I knew him for. It is bizarre to go back to it now because at this point, my wife watched The Walking Dead, so I watched him on that. He is great on that. Because I am a huge James Gunn fan, of course, I've seen him in not just not just the Guardians
Oh
movies,
yeah.
but also Slither and Super. Um,
Mhm.
I he is such a distinctive actor, and it is crazy now to go back and to look at his performance here, where it's crazy that this is 30 years before all of the before
Oh
all the
yeah.
stuff that he's going to be known for. He's great he's only in it very briefly, but he's great. But it does take you out of the movie to be like, one of the first things you see in this movie is Michael Rooker's ass. It is a crazy thing to see in a movie. And it's something that Smith really does, but it's good casting though, and I am glad Smith got him because
Mhm.
the thing about it is Rooker is a very scary and an intimidating presence, and Smith was smart because that is the guy that you get to be scary and intimidating. It's aged the movie really well. You're right that the movie does. I'm I'm older than you, so boy, there's a fun phrase to use. God, I love saying that so much. Like I said, I remember 90s comedies a little bit better. You are right that this movie really does use the R word way too much.
Like
Which is
and the thing, so with for me with that word, I don't like it in any film that's used.
neither.
But I will say with this film, I feel more okay about it because of the fact that I think that Kevin Smith has grown a lot since, and I
Oh,
don't think
absolutely.
he would put that in his films anymore. Or like I
There's a part of me that actually kind of wonders if the scene in Clerks that two, which I'm hesitant to even describe which scene, but where he goes into slurs, isn't Smith to some degree looking at that side of himself too and going, gee, is this really okay?
Mhm. the I like it bothers so the oh it bothers me most when I hear slurs in a film when I'm not able to tell whether this is just something that's in the film or is this actually how these people feel, these real life people feel, like um like for that reason, it really bothered me when I was watching an episode of the '70s Hulk TV show, and
Mhm.
the R slur was used a whole lot in one episode. And that bothered me so much because what's to say that that's not signed that Bill Bixby, who played a David Banner in that, what's to say that's not signed that he said a lot in his regular real life.
No, that's a
That
good
he was
question.
fine with it. That he was fine with saying that. Versus nowadays, if it's said in sign, I'm at least able to feel that this is just a part of the film and not sign that they really feel about people.
I regret
People.
I regret that I have to bring up a 2024 movie, but there is a 2024 movie that used it, but the very
Yeah, I know.
but
I
the
hated
very
that.
I didn't like it there. I really didn't like it
So,
there.
it pissed me off when that scene was in Deadpool and Wolverine. I was like,
Especially
what the hell?
especially because you're doing it with Blade. You're bringing
Uh,
Blade into it. You're bringing Wesley Snipes as Blade.
mhm.
It was just like honestly, it felt
I
like a worse sullying of the character than Blade Trinity.
I'm like and that film, like. There's a part of me that loves Deadpool and Wolverine. I had a lot of fun watching it, but then there's another part of me that's like, there's certain in things in it where I'm like, it does give me this ick factor. I'm like, I know a lot of people have said, oh, they were just making fun of the people who would say words like that, or they were just making fun of the people who complain about wokeness.
But
And I'm
that's the
like,
whole movie. That's the tone of the whole movie.
I'm like, at least to me, it felt like the film was actually trying to say that Deadpool was anti woke, and I hate that
Yeah,
because that's not who Deadpool is.
no, it's not.
That's
And
not who Ryan Reynolds wrote Deadpool to be in the first two Deadpool films.
I honestly didn't recognize Deadpool in this movie compared to those movies. And that is, I liked the film. Well,
I,
my review
no,
exists. That's how I'm going to put it. But
no.
like I said, it is interesting, and I think
Like
that's kind of
this it's just something where I'm like, there's a part of me that really enjoyed parts of it, but then there's a part of me that's just like, I don't other things I don't like, and then um if and like, I mentioned this on Twitter a few days ago when people were talking about how they believe that Nice Pool is based off of this fake nice guy persona that's put on that was put on by Justin, whatever his last name
Falzone.
is.
Yeah.
And if that's actually the case, if that's
Mhm.
actually where everything about Nice Pool is based, why did he put in there that character would be the one who says, as they like what the MCU has done since Endgame. Why did they put
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
makes me think. That makes me think that Ryan Reynolds thinks those of us who do like what Marvel's done are assholes.
Well, I mean,
I don't.
I know you and I are both big fans of the She-Hulk show,
Mm,
which absolutely nailed the material. I still think Hawkeye is phenomenal. Boy, I use that word a lot. I've got to learn. I'm a writer. I've got to learn better adjectives. But it's one of those things where I think Black Widow is still a very strong film. I
mhm.
mean, No Way Home is fantastic. Honestly, honestly, I like way more than I don't, and I think Doctor
Mhm.
Strange 2 is insanely good because it's Sam Raimi on
And it's
Rockstar
just
mode.
like that.
But
Just
yeah, come
and
on.
like him putting that joke on that thing being said onto the character that's we're actually supposed to believe is an asshole who's fake being nice. Um, that along with the fact that the film feels like it's trying to push this anti woke narrative
Yeah,
makes me think that Ryan Reynolds dislikes the fact that the MCU since Endgame has been more progressive and more having more female characters, more characters who are not white. I like and
No,
I'm and
and it's bizarre
which
because
is weird because I don't think that's the kind of person that Ryan Reynolds is in real
no,
life.
no, I think he's shown that he's very much a very different person from that. I will say, to bring this back to the movie, it's interesting to me that this movie already shows some of the ways I think Kevin Smith is one of our more progressive comedy filmmakers of
Oh
this
yeah.
style. I think he is. It's interesting to me that Smith is genuinely progressive. Now, this is still a very white film.
Mhm.
And I will say that Smith handling race is probably the worst thing he does. I think it's best that we just not even talk about that. It is a good thing that this movie is white because every time he handles race, it just gets bad. And that says something when he's got Chris Rock in there as one of his people. I don't know. I thought he did good. He did well with Rock and Dogma, but otherwise, it hadn't been good. But I think it's interesting to me how the women are written in this movie
I think
compared
it's
to the 90s. I think
yeah.
that's something that really fascinates me going back.
I think one with the progressiveness of this film, the particular thing that I noticed while I was watching it this time, I think is really cool, is the fact that while yes, there are some gay jokes in this film, it's very clear that he is not homophobic. Like he even made a point to have a character um calling someone homophobic and the other character being like, no, I'm not a bigot, I don't
Yeah.
I'm not gay myself, but I am not a bigot. And I think it's really cool to me when I see things from the 90s do stuff like that.
Well,
Like
well,
you can
I
joke
know what
about some
happens.
gay things, but you're still making a point to say we're not against these people.
Well, but you have to remember who Kevin Smith is. He is someone for whom, when he first came to Hollywood, his closest friends were gay. He became good friends with the screenwriter actress Guinevere Turner, who would go on to write American Psycho, and he became fascinated by her. And Chasing Amy is to a great degree based on him getting to know her and being fascinated by the idea of here's this beautiful feminine woman who's queer, and I'm having conflicting feelings about this. What do I then do about that? I think it's interesting that Chasing Amy, in hindsight, is one of the very first movies to deal with the idea that sexuality can be fluid, that labels can be
Oh yeah,
fluid.
I
I
think.
honestly think Chasing Amy has aged like absolute goddamn wine. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sorry if I keep.
So
Oh wait, please feel free to tell me. Feel free to tell me if I can if I need to stop using that word. It's just one I like.
no, you're fine. Fine. Um, Chasing Amy, I think is a very interesting thing where for a long time people thought it was a very backwards film, but in recent years, particularly because of that documentary that came out that was about out, I'm pretty sure it was a gay couple who they either gay or lesbian couple who Chasing Amy was this big step for them. I think that's changed a lot of people's view of that film, and I think that's really cool.
I think it was one of the first movies that I really looked at and was like, oh wait. I think it was because I watched it at the same time that I watched the others.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those movies. It's funny. It's like The Crying Game. It's one of the first times where I saw an idea that is now incredibly common. In the case of
Mm-hmm.
The Crying Game, it was the idea of detransitioning being traumatic. And even though this movie has this image, I think Smith is very clearly trying to tell us that Alyssa is right to decide what her labels are. She's right to be who
Mm-hmm.
fluid. She's right to be, and Smith could not be more clearly obvious about what he
Oh
thinks
yeah,
in the movie.
and
And I'm fascinated by
I
that about Smith.
I
That
think what makes it even cooler. Um, not only was this a film in the 90s, and he himself is a very progressive person, but this is a studio film.
Yeah.
And a lot of studio films in the 90s were not willing to be that progressive.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought this up because I want to talk for a moment about who Gramercy Films was at this point in 1995. They were dying. I don't think they survived to 1996 or to 1997, but they were dying and they were taking some wild swings on the way out. Barbed Wire and Mystery Science Theater 3000 were kind of their last two films. And they chose to promote Barbed Wire over MST3K, the movie, which I think was the correct decision. I actually think MST3K, the movie, is a really weak episode of the show. Honestly, I prefer the Riff Tracks live events I've gone to be blunt. But they were a studio. The movie that broke them in the United States, but unfortunately couldn't last, was Four Weddings and a Funeral. Like that was their big movie in the U.S. and they did take some swings. They did take some swings. Like I said, they did that one. Of course, they got swallowed up by Universal is what happened. Of course, it's one of those things. I think they merged with October Films, and then they merged with Universal and became USA Films. Then that became Focus Features, and Focus Features has stayed in place for 22 years. So.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. This is a studio film, and that's the thing that's one thing that I'm glad. That's one of the things that I think is really interesting about this movie is this is one of the only times that Smith was working with a studio budget. This movie was $6 million, which in 1995 was a decent chunk of change. This was him working with an actual budget. I think that enabled him to get a cast. One thing I will say is, boy, it's obvious that Smith loved Dazed and Confused. It's funny that never comes up when people discuss this movie, but given that he stole two actors from that movie, Joey Lauren Adams and Ben Affleck, it's so obvious he wanted to make Dazed and Confused again. Which, you know what, not a bad goal. Trying to be Richard Linklater is an excellent goal if you want to make a movie. I love Richard Linklater; he's one of my favorite filmmakers. I don't think Smith ever had the ambition of Linklater. Who, of course, Linklater's movie in 1995 was Before Sunrise. So, yeah, just gonna let that one sit.
You're talking about the like the progress. That's the way he writes women in this. I do think that's a really cool thing. Like,
oh yeah, let's get back to
that. So they never act like it was wrong for either of these two women to break up with their partner, and women do not need to change in the film to
it's the men.
It is the men who have to learn to be better.
Well, not only does the movie not say that they're, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say, to back you up and to say, yeah, it's not only that the women are not wrong, it's that they're absolutely dead right. They're the beacons that the men have to run to.
And there's another aspect with the women, and this is something that I think is kind of the case in a lot of Kevin Smith movies. Is yes, there's a sexualization there, but they are wanting to do this. It's not they're forced, and that's and I think that is a very very progressive thing, even though some people don't seem to understand that idea, which is that being feminist isn't just meaning women shouldn't be sexualized. It's women choosing what they want, and we see as we see particularly within this film, I think this is I think it's the case with all of his films, but particularly within this film, like we have a female character who thinks that Bob was perving on her, but then she decides herself that that she's okay with that, with that, and wants to get changed out in public to make it easier for him. And showing how she is choosing to show off her body. and and I think that's a really cool thing. You don't see a lot in films from the '90s. Women actually getting to have that choice.
Well, you know, then I have to talk about the topless psychic scene with
I
Priscilla Barnes, which is, for the record, a masterpiece of comic writing. The
love
thing
that scene.
the thing you have to remember is Barnes was a sex symbol from the 70s. She was a known entity. She is fun. She is excellent in this scene. She's very good. She's very funny. She is also completely in control of the scene.
Yeah.
She completely runs the joke. Every word she says is correct. Everything she interprets about the scenario is right. You're right. It is fascinating to me that Smith does this, where he has this scene that could have easily, and then the scene where she peels off the fake nipple and pops it
Yeah.
in her mouth. It's just a perfect little punchline.
Which I'm wondering so much with that scene. It was like, what was that fake nipple? Was that a piece of candy that she put on?
I,
What was?
I don't know.
And if
It's
it was, what kind of candy is that?
probably gelatin or something. But
But
it's one of those things where you're right that Smith. I mean, I think this even goes back to Clerks, the famous, the whole argument that the whole film is about
Mhm.
is the idea. I love that over and over again. There's this running theme through Smith's movies of women having sexual histories and men freaking out about it,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
Smith constantly pulling men aside and going, "You
Yeah.
idiots! It
No.
doesn't matter." I am not shocked to point out that Smith has been married now for many years
Mhm.
to the same woman. Is very happy with her. He, it's interesting that you see this confidence that Smith has with these women, where it's like, okay, they're sexual beings. You're juvenile little bastards for thinking that you're the first and that you're the only and you're the all encompassing. I like that, of course, Doherty and Lee have that quickie in the elevator, and then she
Mhm.
brushes him off because she's still pissed at him.
Yeah.
I like that again. Doherty comes out of that scene as she's in the right.
Mhm.
Again, I love her performance in this movie so much.
Definitely. Oh, one thing and this is just it's funny with that with the topless fortune teller scene. I so oh Jason Lee his character he is mortified by seeing this third
Mhm.
nipple. He finds this so disgusting that she has a third nipple, but he wants to check if she has more additional body parts. If you're disgusted by the nipple, why would you want to see more?
Because the character is an idiot. Character is an idiot. I mean, I really do think I'm really fascinated by, again, how much every decision that the men in this movie make can be summed up by they're idiots. The men in this movie are such idiots.
Mhm.
Uh, and again, I think it's interesting that, I mean, before we were doing this cast, I was trying to think in my head, why did this movie flop? Why did it tank? And I still can't. I have thought this over since I
I,
saw the film, because when I watched it, I knew it was a flop. I have still
I
never come to
think
a decision.
I think, to be honest, a big part of there are two, I think, big parts with it. One, Kevin Smith was not the recognizable name he is today.
No.
And I think that probably cut the amount of people who were going to see the film. But also, as I said, it is very much an homage to comic book lovers and superhero lovers, which was not in the '90s this normalized thing, and so general audiences in the '90s might not have found that to be
You might be
quite
right.
as an interesting thing as those of us do today.
Well, then, okay, because we are both comic book fans, can we talk about how much this movie absolutely crushes that culture? How
Oh
much
yeah.
it understands it? This really is a beautiful portrait, because it's fascinating, because it's a portrait of something that had not become the all-encompassing. Because I'll say this: if this exact movie came out in 2008, it would have made $250 million. I think it
Also,
would have been a blockbuster because first of all, movies were just making those numbers at that point. That was the Judd Apatow. Now I say that, and Smith's movie in 2008 was a flop because it was misreleased completely. But I do think that this movie would have done better. I think that this movie captures a period where comics were big enough that they were in the that you knew who these characters were, but they weren't the world conquerors that they are now. And I think Smith gets that moment so well. He gets the concept of the mall comic book store. I was about to say it doesn't exist, but one just opened in Little Rock, actually.
that's cool.
One actually just
Uh,
opened.
I I've never experienced a mall comic book store. I've like
I
when
have.
I go to go to the mall, all the closest thing to comics that I can and see there is either Hot Topic, like
Mm,
GameStop, or Barnes and Noble.
yeah. Well, okay, you're right. And that's one other thing that I do want to point out is this movie captures a vision of malls that I do want to point out is really not what we have anymore. I do think that is something that I think gives this movie an interesting subtext.
Oh yeah,
Because
and I would malls used to be a place you hang out at. I versus I these days is really only ever go to a mall if I have a specific thing that I'm going to look for there.
same here. Same here. I'll go into vintage stock to see if they've got any new graphic novels in, and then I just get out. And I think that's the thing. This movie depicts a world where you can just walk around. It is. There is one other thing. There's something that I just thought of that I think is interesting about this movie. Is it's interesting that we usually have the image of mall cops as a joke, and this one, the mall cop is serious business. How familiar are you with Sven Ole Thorson, who plays LaFours? Because I know a little bit
I
about
think
this.
I've seen him in something else, but I don't really know him. No.
This was Arnold Schwarzenegger's body double.
Oh, cool.
That's he dated Grace Jones at one point. This dude was serious business. He's a big scary guy. Again, I think it's interesting how much Smith uses big scary guys in this movie. I still think William Atherton was completely wrong for this movie. I really think Rooker is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting that Smith depicts mall security not as a joke, but this is one of the only times where you see it done, and it's no, you don't want to cross this guy. And I think that's kind of.
No,
I do think that is kind of funny.
I do think it's funny as well, but also I do think that he might not have been necessarily mall security and more the head of security for this show that was going on.
Okay. I
And
see.
I'm wondering if
Probably
that's
right.
what that's the difference
That may have been. That may have been.
because he always seemed to be aimed to be in Michael Rooker's character's control.
You're right. You're probably right about that. That is a good point. And I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna double back. We're gonna go way back to something that you brought up earlier with the escalator because I
Mhm.
just thought of something, and I'm sorry that I'm gonna drag us all the way back to that.
No
But
worries,
I
no
wanted,
worries.
but I want to make a point about this, which is that I think that the kid on the escalator is probably one of. There are three jokes that I think people will know from this movie. The chocolate covered pretzel, which is just a gross, disgusting joke that's beautifully executed. There is There is the sailboat, which I want to come back to that one in a moment. The kid on the escalator. Do you know what I think the most brilliant thing about the joke about the kid getting caught on the escalator is? We don't see it. We don't see it. If
Yeah,
we
no.
saw it, I think the joke would be absolutely ruined. I think it would be graphic and
Oh yeah,
disgusting. It
that
would be pleasant.
no, yeah.
It's
There was no way they would have done something like that. That would have been absolutely insane.
it would have broken the movie.
Mhm.
But because we just hear it, and we don't even hear it, we just hear that it happened. I think that makes the joke 10 times funnier. So I do also want to talk about the sailboat because, man, Ethan Suplee in this movie is just wonderful.
Oh, definitely. And um, this is like so. I have seen him before this, but it was much later in his career, and I think it's really cool to see him in this. It's where I mainly know him from is My Name Is Earl.
Same here, same here. And
I love My Name Is Earl.
I do too. I love that show greatly. I will forever love that it is the reason that the phrase Emmy winner Jamie Presley is a thing. Because let me tell you something, there was a period in the 90s where that sounded about as far fetched as anything you could ever say. Boy, she did a lot of direct video movies, is all I'm saying. She absolutely deserved her Emmy for that show. She is incredible on it. But he is so good. The fact that he never won, I think, is criminal. And of course, it is funny because, of course, it's him and Jason Lee in this movie, though they don't really interact that much. But he's so he is actually kind of an example of studio meddling. My understanding is he was one of the people that was like, the studio said, you've got to put this guy in here because I think it was supposed to be Scott Mosier in that part.
Interesting.
And the studio stepped
Did,
in, but Smith was happy with it because he does give this amazing performance because
yeah.
he's just so serious about it. He never
Uh,
betrays the joke.
I love the subtle fourth wall break at the end, and of him just like, really? I do get to see that, see
Yeah,
the boat.
it's great. It's great. And Bo, I've never been able to see Magic Eyes myself, so
I have not either. So
I think that's the thing. I think Smith knew a lot of people. I wouldn't be surprised if Smith was one of them who just that thing pissed them off so much. Again, I think this movie is so much small business that just accumulates.
mhm.
I can't help but wonder if that's why this is the one Smith movie. That this and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back are the ones that I come back to the most. And I think it's because they're so random.
Mhm.
They're so loose. They're so just little
I
bits.
I think that he's kind of come back to that idea with with his recent films. He's gotten a lot more just creative freedom with them, and with like Clerks 3 and the Jay and Silent Bob reboot, which is really cool.
I've
I
not
think.
seen, I have not seen any of these, but I've heard they're really good.
Oh,
I need to.
yeah, I really liked them, but the one thing that saddens me about them, is their release, the way they were released. He took these movies on tour instead of just releasing them in theaters, which meant I was not able to see them in theaters because they never were playing anywhere near me, and that really saddens me because I've never gotten to go see a Kevin Smith film in theaters, and I really would love to be able to do that.
I have seen three, or no, I've seen four.
Nice.
I've seen four. I saw Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. What little? Yes. I saw Jay and in a little bit. Lola, baby, I'm on the phone. Yes. I saw Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. I saw uh, Jersey Girl. I saw. Um, let's see. I saw Jersey Girl. I saw Clerks 2, and I did see Zach and Miri Make a Porno. And then after that, I kind of that one I am really mixed on. That one I feel like if you want my opinion on it, change depends on the day. It's one of those movies. I
I think the Zack and Mary Make a Porno is one that I'm that so I haven't watched that in many years, and when I watched that, I didn't know that was a Kevin Smith movie,
I think
uh,
that's the problem.
and I kind of want to go back and watch it now with that view and see if that see how that changes my feelings on it. To me, it feels like just another one of the Judd Apatow comedies of
I
the 2000s,
The reason that I am ultimately negative on it is because it is him trying to do Judd
which
Apatow.
which I just
It's a spiteful
I
move.
like like Judd Apatow comedies.
Huh?
That's a very different and style than Kevin Smith, and I kind of want to see Seth Rogen actually in the Kevin Smith style.
Well, I will say this about it, and this is really something because I was listening to the Smodcast before and after the movie, and the way that Smith reacted after, I actually had to quit listening to the podcast and couldn't watch some of his films for about 5 years because Smith took it so poorly. But it's one of those things where I then look back at this movie and I'm like, you made this movie so nakedly only because you were mad that Judd Apatow was doing your style of humor.
I
And
don't even think it is his style of
I
humor.
don't think it is, but I think that it's
Hmm.
Smith thought
But
that it was, and so he tried to make a movie.
I
He
think.
he clearly, of course, stole Apatow's
Mhm.
cast. I mean, when you take three actors from Apatow's movies,
Mhm.
you're
Uh,
pretty nakedly. It's just I
I do think though that happily he has changed
I
a
think
lot of
so.
his view from since then and which I think I think these days he would probably be very happy at the seeing a Judd Apatow feel kind of like his
Yeah.
is.
What?
I think he I and a big part of that is because he has developed a mindset at of he hates criticizing other people's work. He would
Yeah.
rather just talk about what he loves about it, which I think is one of the coolest things about him. Him is I it's part of where I developed my style of review from
Yeah.
is that because I don't want to talk negatively about the films I review. I would rather just talk about everything I like about it.
You
I'll
know.
talk about negative things, particularly if they're things that I think are morally bad
Mhm.
real life, like with the R slur and how this film portrays men as wanting to sleep with 15-year
Yeah.
old girls. But like with most films, I'm not gonna criticize them and for like be like, oh, it's a badly made film or something. And because I'm like, there's someone out there who likes the film, and I don't want to yuck their young. I don't want to be shitting on the thing that they like. I'd rather just talk about the things I like.
You know who actually had this theory, and he did this in his reviews, was Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert's theory was always this, which was if I want to write, which was he said, I write my negative reviews so that the person that wants to see this movie, that's going to love this movie, is going to is going to read my review and see if they want to do it, which I think is so funny because the horror community lambasted the man for so many years for being so anti-horror. But I think the whole point of his reviews was these movies are gross and disgusting to me, but I know that you would love them. Here, I'm showing you that this is what you want. I really get that vibe when I go back and I look at his reviews. And I will also point out Ebert was also quite a horror fan. 4-star reviews for stuff like The Descent, May. Um, uh, let's see, I'm trying to think. Pan's Lab. He was a big Guillermo del Toro guy. He was a big Halloween, Dawn of the Dead. He loved Romero. I think he gets a bad rap. I don't know. I mean, I'm the same way. I don't. When I did the DC versus Marvel Omnibus review, the thing that I really noticed was I loved most of the stories in it. It felt good to write that review. I just did a top
Oh
15
yeah.
Creed songs review. It felt good to write that review because because that's a perfect example. Creed is one of the most hated bands in the world, but I'm a fan.
Mhm.
I got to write something that let me say, okay, I like this. I'm with you, man. I don't, I don't know. Guy
I don't
Fieri.
want to spend, yeah, it's just like I don't want to spend my energy on
Hmm,
being negative, which that's very much sign that Kevin Smith has developed
I
since his
love that.
heart attack. And I
Yeah,
think it's such a cool thing, and that is a big thing that inspired me with how I like to do my
and
reviews.
I think Smith really, yeah, post heart attack. I mean, I do follow the man on social media. He is an absolute blast there. He is a perpetual force of optimism and good. And you know,
Mhm.
I don't know. We never know a person. We never know. Smith seems like a good man, and he seems like someone that I want to emulate. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but it's funny because we're talking about him now. I think it's really cool that the stuff that I admire about him now, again, when you're dealing with progressive artists, you usually have to allow them time to have grown. Again, I'm fascinated by how Smith was 20 years ahead of a lot of guys
Oh yeah.
in saying these things. And I love that Mallrats is a perfect example. I don't know, maybe that might be a reason that I think the movie became a video hit. And I will point out it did do amazingly well on video. It did become
Mhm.
a big rental. I don't know. It's one of those things. I'm almost out of things to say about the movie because what can I say except it is a movie that I put on every time. I do have a digital copy of it, so that's how I watch it. I put it on and I relax.
Mhm.
And it is a movie of optimism, and it is a movie that argues that even the stupidest people in the world can get better. And I don't know. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Definitely.
I don't know. Like I said, I just as someone who was there, I mean, I don't know. I say that I was 10. I was 11 when this movie came out. Let's not kid ourselves that I was there. You know what I mean. But
Yeah.
as someone who has a memory of it, I don't know. It's just a cool movie. I don't know.
Mhm.
I just love this movie.
Oh yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I love it. Love it too. And
And that's why I
um,
wanted to come on this cast was because I knew that it would be fun to take a moment to just at least say, okay, here's a
I
movie
think.
that I think is perfect. Not
Uh,
perfect, but you know what I mean? A perfect hangout movie.
yeah.
Like I said, it has problems.
And like um I want to particularly like talk about like the on like about how Stan Lee's scene
Yes.
in
I knew
it.
there was one thing that we needed.
I
I think it's
I love those scenes so much.
I think it
They're
honestly
so beautifully wrote.
I
Even
think
though
it's
even though Stan Lee was bullshitting it the whole time.
I honestly think it's probably Lee's best cameo in any of the movies that he's done. And I have a theory about why that is. Lee famously actually hated comic book movies. I think he really enjoyed this one. I think this was one that was probably really closer to who Stan Lee was as a person. I do love that. I don't actually like this movie very much. I'm not a big Captain Marvel fan, mostly because boy, did I miss seeing Carol Danvers in that movie. I wish she was in it. That's my whole issue with that movie. But I love that they throw the scene in there where
Mhm.
he's reading his lines for this. I think that's beautiful.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely, and like I think is just from just from a fan and someone who kind of idolizes these people. I think it's so cool that there is something out there that has both Kevin Smith and Stan Lee because those are two people that I very much idolize.
It
And
honestly,
that's so cool. Oh, and I wish that they interacted in the film.
I do too. I think you can see this movie as almost a moment where Lee's brand of being the face of comics and Smith's take over again. Man, you've never read Guardian Devil. I'm telling you, it will change your opinion of Smith as a writer. It absolutely altered mine dramatically. I actually listened to an audio drama of it that adapted the whole thing, in addition to having read it. Yeah, Kevin Smith is a much darker writer than we think.
Yeah, you can
Later.
definitely do serious stuff.
I mean, well, have you seen Red State?
Which I have not.
It's
I've heard
brilliant.
of it.
It's genius. It's genius. It's genius.
Like, and I honestly think this is kind of the case for a lot of people who are comedians. Is when you is because it's so hard to do comedic acting or comedic writing. When they do serious stuff, it's absolutely amazing
I
with a
think
lot
so.
of
I think
them,
you're
and
right. I think you're right.
like I've never actually watched Good Will Hunting, but I've seen scenes of Robin Williams in it, and it's such powerful stuff, which is so interesting because he is not known for that serious work, but it just it works
I'm gonna
so
say
well.
Good Will Hunting is one of those movies that changed my life. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say this. You can search far and wide. You will never find one person that thinks Williams didn't deserve that Oscar. It is one of the most deserved Oscar wins of all time. I can, I and Smith executive produced the movie. He was an executive producer on it. Good Will Hunting is amazing. It is a great movie, and like I said, Williams, you'll never find anyone that won't tell you
Mhm.
not just the idea of, well, on principle, Robin Williams should have won an Oscar. It's no, 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 no. For one time, the Academy actually rewarded someone for what was actually their best performance. Uh, Good Will Hunting is, and I will say this: the printed script is a wildly different beast than the movie. I don't know which one I prefer. I think they both have their own merits. The printed script has so many scenes that got cut or altered. The printed script is what I read first. But I love it. I love it. I'm so glad you gave me a chance to talk about Good Will Hunting because
Yeah, yeah,
just
I really do think that so many comedic people are absolutely amazing when you allow them to do serious stuff, which honestly it surprises me that I feel that way because I don't actually like serious stuff very much. But if it's a comedic actor doing a serious role, I'm instantly hooked.
I'm
I'm
fascinated.
instantly into it.
Well, a good example for me of that is, people forget that Tom Hanks started as a very goofy actor. He started very silly, and then, of course, he
Mhm.
became one of the greats. I mean, and then again, I think that there's other examples of this. I think Denzel Washington is one of our most natural comedic actors of all time,
Oh,
and also one of our absolutely most terrifying serious actors. Uh,
think about Michael Keaton
Michael
and
Keaton is one of my favorite examples.
how people acted when he got cast as Batman and in the 80s.
And then he was incredible.
Yeah.
I still think he should have won the Oscar for Birdman. And Eddie Redmayne must look at his Oscar and go, "Ooh, this is a fraud." I love Birdman, though Birdman is a comedy. I will point that out. Birdman is a comedy. It's a great comedy. It's a rare comedy that won Best Picture. That's another movie I love, 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 love that movie. I don't know. Keaton's great. And again, there's so much of that. I don't know.
One that I felt recently was I've always known the actor Adam Scott for comedy.
Mhm.
But I watched for the first time I'm all of Severance season 1 last year, and I was so enthralled by it
I
because
still need to see it. I still
which
need to see it.
which I didn't know Adam Scott had that in him, but he was absolutely amazing in it. And this is a very serious a serious show and a very serious role. And I thought that was it's so cool
I'll tell you
to see
a
stuff like
good.
that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, connecting to Scott, a good example of this. While we're still on this, is The Visit. Is I love The Visit. I'm a huge M Night Shyamalan guy. I am a hardcore M Night Shyamalan defender. One of the most interesting things about the movie is pretty much all of the serious, powerful, dramatic beats in the movie are given to Catherine Hahn. When the twist is dropped, she's the one that drops the twist. Then at the end, she gives a monologue, and I'm talking around the movie because if people haven't seen it, it's Shyamalan. You know that it's not what it seems.
It's gotta be a twist. Yeah.
Oh, actually, though, I will point out, Trap doesn't have a twist. Trap is, from what I've heard, Trap doesn't have a twist. I've had people tell me that that one's actually straightforward. But
there also
yeah,
a film I watched recently from him. I don't remember what it was. I don't actually remember what it was called, but it was Signs. Signs.
Signs doesn't have a twist,
which doesn't have a twist either.
It is great.
I really enjoyed watching Signs. My only criticism of it is that Mel Gibson is so awful as the lead.
See, I thought Gibson was great. I actually thought he was amazing.
To me, it felt like he just had no personality. He was a brick wall in that film to me. And maybe that's just my feelings in real life about Mel Gibson and rubbing off on my feelings in the film. But I don't know. He just didn't feel like he was nearly as interesting as any of the other characters to me.
See, I saw the film before we really knew any of this, and I didn't have that put in my brain.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I don't know, but I'm trying to think. I mean, I will say, if we're on recent stuff that we watched, I will take a moment to say right now, Honora is getting so much Oscar buzz, all that. I'm going to tell people to see that one because that one's really good.
I definitely want to see that. I want to see that, but there is a part of me that's like, I do dislike a little bit that they did not have intimacy coordinators on set. Like, I think that was a little weird.
Agree. You know what's interesting about this? One of the best articles that I've seen on this was Ewan McGregor and Mary Elizabeth Winstead talking about why they wanted intimacy coordinators on set. And you know what's fascinating about those two saying that they were pleased with it? They're husband and wife.
Yeah, it's like, the thing is, intimacy coordinators are not there just for the people who are on camera. They're for every single person that's on set.
They're stunt coordinators, is what it is. They're stunt coordinators.
They are there to make sure every person on set is comfortable when these scenes are happening, and that's why I believe that intimacy coordinators should be mandatory on every set.
I agree, and I will say that is a fair comp. I will also say that I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to be wrapping it up soon.
Understandable, yeah.
But I think that's fair. No intimacy coordinators were required for Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. Boy, that has got to be the biggest leap anyone has ever made. But I will say that one's on Netflix now, and I do recommend that one too. That, like I said, no intimacy coordinators on that one, but a lot of handling of life.
Is there sexual scenes in the Wallace and Gromit?
Oh God, no!
I would hope not.
I could put it on for my 2-year-old. I did put it on for my 2-year-old.
It's not like it's signed like Team America or something.
Oh no! I will say this.
I hate Team America.
Oh my God! I want to fist bump you through the phone. I hate Team America so much.
I don't understand why people like it. It just like people say that they're making fun of offensive people. No, I think it's just being offensive for offensive sake.
Can I tell you the thing that shocked me the most about this movie is I thought it was the laziest, most clearly put together in a week script ever. They spent 2 years writing it.
Funny. There was not a single scene in that film where I found it funny. I was just the whole time I was like really? None of this is good.
They literally reused.
Not interesting either.
They literally lift an entire musical moment from
It's
South
so
Park. They
bad.
take the montage song, lift it completely.
It-
I, I saw Team America at a sneak preview. It was one of those things where it was so bad that I was shell shocked that I recommended it for a little bit because I couldn't understand how it was so bad. And then I think after the 2004 election wore off and everything was that, then I looked back and I was like, this movie is pathetic. It's worthless.
Another film that I think that people say is like making fun of shitty people, but to me feels like it's just being offensive for offensive sake, and I hated watching it. It's the first Borat movie.
You know, I'm going to
I
say this about
really
the first
disliked
Borat
that.
movie. I loved it at the time, but I'm going to say this. I am absolutely bound and determined that I will never watch it again because I know for a fact that if I watch it, it's funny because I watched the first Borat movie for the second time the same day that I saw Casino Royale.
Mhm.
I know which one of those movies I would watch again in a heartbeat because I know which one of those would actually hold up. The thing about it
Yeah.
is, Borat at the time, I told myself, oh, the joke is, aren't these people all awful? And then I go back and I'm like, uh, the entire
Mm.
the entire point of this movie is that this guy is being an epic a-hole,
Mhm.
and it's
I
agony. Yeah, you're right. You're right
I
about Borat.
like I like actually the sequel to Borat, which most
Yeah,
people hate it. But I like the sequel because that one, it's actually obvious that they are making fun of these right wing bigoted assholes.
and
Versus the first one does not feel like
the
that.
first one really doesn't, and I don't know. I actually think you're right about that. And like I said, I think it's one of those things you are aware at the you are aware that there are certain movies that you just should not go back to, and that's one of them. But
And
now you've actually
I
made me
do
want to
think
watch the
with
sequel.
I think with films like Borat and Team America, part of my absolute disdain for them has to do with the fact that I didn't watch them in 2000s when they came out. I watched them within the past like 5 years or so for the first time, and I was just like, and watching them with this modern lens, I'm like, yeah, no, this none of this is good, and I don't know why people
And I
love
think
this so
and I
much.
think that then brings me back to, and this is a perfect way I think then to close out, is that because I came to Mallrats 6 years after it had already tanked and flopped and gone, it really spoke to me then that, oh, this must have been something really strong. And like I said, it holds up. I
Oh
think
yeah,
because it is so progressive in its thinking,
definitely.
it holds up. It remains great, and I'm really thank you for having me on to talk about it. It was
Yeah,
really a lot of fun to talk about it.
thank you for coming on. The last thing, and I'm not gonna make you stay for a while to talk about this.
Yeah,
Is are you interested in the Mallrats sequel that Kevin Smith has been trying to develop for the past like 10 years?
I don't think he's ever going to make it. So I don't. So I don't know what the. So I
I
don't even
feel
know
like
what. I don't
I
think
feel
he'll
like
make
there's
it.
a much higher chance now that he's gonna make it, just based on the fact that he's brought back two of his previous things with doing Clerks 3 and Jalen Silent Bob reboot. Ode. I feel like now there's a much more high chance of him trying to get
Huh.
made. But he has been developing it for the past 10 years years,
If
and
it
I will.
happens, if it happens, I'll absolutely watch it. I'll say
Uh,
that. If it happens, I'll
um,
absolutely watch it. And now that
I
we've had
think
this
it'll be
conversation, I
very
kind of want to.
interesting to see um the difference in how in like comic book culture within this one versus in the first one because he's gonna have just as much of an homage to comic book culture in that, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the sequel we get a lot of calling out the toxic bigoted side of the fandom.
You know,
I think that could be a sign that he does a lot of, and I would love to see that.
who Kevin Smith reminds me of, and I think this is a good thing. Are you familiar with the comic strip Foxtrot?
I think I've heard of it, but I don't know them.
It deals a lot. It deals a lot with because the character that they use as their POV character is a is like 10 or 12, they use him to represent how babyish it is. Now the strip stopped running dailies in 2006, but you go back and you look at this and it was dealing with the same things. Again, I guess my final point is, as long as Smith is calling out man babies, I'm there.
Mhm.
And
Oh
that's
yeah,
my and
definitely.
that's my last note. So
Yeah. All right. Well,
go out and note that.
everyone, please check out Austin on the Omniplex X podcast.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more from him. And thank you everyone for listening. If you like the scam analysis, please give a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episodes. Please let me know. If you'd like to listen more from me, please subscribe. Many more game analysis from me coming, so keep on the lookout. This again is your host, Smash Ray John, signing off.